The moment was shocking. Millions of eyes were glued to the screen as the elegant Melania Trump, former First Lady, appeared on live television. She had always been composed, poised, and fiercely private. But that day, something was different. As the cameras rolled, a reporter, known for pushing the boundaries, asked a question that struck Melania at her core. It wasn't a political question. It wasn't about her husband, the former President Donald Trump. No, this was personal. A question about her life, her struggles, and the unimaginable pressure she had been under for years. The question was simple, but devastating. How do you cope with the weight of your husband's legacy? For a moment, Melania froze. The room fell silent. The reporter, sensing a shift, pushed further, but this time, the words stung in a way none of them could have anticipated. Melania's composure cracked, and tears began to stream down her face. She looked down, as if trying to gather her thoughts, but the emotion was too much to contain. The audience was stunned. This was not the Melania they had seen in public, stoic, collected, and always in control. This was a vulnerable woman, broken by the unrelenting weight of public expectations, standing in front of millions, raw and unguarded. Her body trembled as she struggled to speak, and then, in a moment of sheer vulnerability, Melania collapsed onto the floor, unable to hold back her tears any longer. The live audience watched in horror and disbelief, unsure of how to react. It was the kind of moment that no one saw coming. A First Lady, a global icon, reduced to tears on live television. But it wasn't just the collapse that shocked people. It was the reaction of the audience. The camera zoomed out to reveal the stunned faces of the crew, the reporters, and the viewers at home. Some were trying to comprehend what had just happened. Others seemed uncomfortable, unsure whether to offer comfort or maintain their professionalism. The live broadcast went silent, except for the sound of Melania's sobs filling the air. Why did this happen? That was the question everyone was asking. The answers were more complicated than anyone could imagine. For years, Melania had been a figure in the shadows, silently supporting her husband while enduring intense scrutiny and criticism. She was rarely seen in public, and when she was, it was always with an air of perfect control. But behind that facade, there was so much more. Behind the immaculate suits and perfectly styled hair, Melania carried the weight of being the First Lady in the most controversial political era in recent history. Her emotional breakdown was a moment that encapsulated everything she had silently endured. The constant media attacks, the judgmental comments about her marriage, and the never-ending pressure of being thrust into a role that she never asked for. It was all too much for anyone to bear, let alone a woman who had never fully embraced the spotlight. As the camera captured her on the floor, unable to collect herself, the audience witnessed a side of Melania that few had ever seen. It wasn't just about her husband's political legacy. It was about her own personal journey, the isolation she felt, and the emotional toll of living under the constant glare of public scrutiny. Her collapse sent a message, loud and clear. Behind the poised exterior of a public figure was a human being with feelings, fears, and vulnerabilities. She had become a symbol of strength for many, but this raw moment exposed her weakness, and in doing so, made her even more relatable. The broadcast continued in the background, but the focus had shifted. The viewers were no longer focused on the politics of the moment, but on the woman who had been holding it all together for so long. People across the country, and even the world, began to rally behind her. What was once a controversial figure now became a symbol of resilience and strength in the face of insurmountable odds. The moment had turned into a viral sensation. Social media exploded with sympathy and support, as well as a sense of disbelief. People began to reflect on the immense pressure that public figures face and how it often goes unnoticed. But the biggest question on everyone's mind was simple. What will happen next? As Melania Trump sat there on the floor, her tears were no longer just about the question or the moment. They were the culmination of years of silent suffering, the weight of public expectation, and the unbearable pressure she had borne in the public eye. The world had been watching her for years, from the moment her husband ran for office to his presidency and even beyond. But for the first time, she was showing the world her raw vulnerability. The silence was deafening. The camera zoomed in on Melania as she took deep, shaking breaths, trying to regain her composure. The audience, still in shock, did not know what to do or say. The reporter, who had inadvertently triggered this emotional outpouring, now found himself in an awkward position. He had not expected this. No one had. The live broadcast continued, but it was clear that the focus had shifted. Viewers at home, who had been expecting a normal interview, were now witnessing an unprecedented moment of personal exposure. Across social media, people were stunned. Thousands of tweets and posts flooded the internet, each trying to process what had just happened. Support, shock, and empathy were expressed from every corner of the globe. In that moment, Melania Trump became more than just the wife of a controversial former president. She became a symbol of the emotional toll that public life can take on those who live under the spotlight. For years, Melania had been the subject of speculation, criticism, and intense scrutiny, but few had ever considered the emotional cost that came with it. The incident sparked a wave of public empathy. Celebrities, politicians, and even ordinary people reached out to express their support. Some shared their own stories of dealing with public expectations, while others simply offered words of comfort. For the first time in a long while, people saw Melania not as a political figure, but as a human being, someone who had lived through struggles that, until that moment, had largely gone unnoticed. As she sat there, clearly struggling with the overwhelming emotion, the producer signaled for a break. The camera cut away briefly, giving Melania a moment of privacy, but the moment was already bigger than any broadcast. It wasn't just about her, it was about everyone who had ever felt crushed by the weight of expectations, who had ever felt as though they were living for someone else's approval, and who had ever been forced to keep their pain hidden from the world. When the broadcast returned, Melania had wiped her tears, but there was no mistaking the vulnerability that lingered in her eyes. She took a deep breath, steadied herself, and looked at the camera. Her voice was shaky at first, but it soon grew steady as she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said, her words heavy with emotion. "But sometimes the weight of everything becomes too much." Her words, though simple, resonated with so many who had experienced their own personal battles. For a moment, it felt as if the entire world was united in understanding the pressure she had been under. It was a moment of connection that transcended politics. In the days that followed, Melania's moment of emotional vulnerability became the subject of countless discussions. Many praised her bravery for showing the world a side of herself that had never been seen before. Others reflected on the importance of mental health and the need to create space for people to express their emotions without fear of judgment. But amidst all the praise, there were also those who criticized her for what they saw as a lapse in composure. They said she should have been more prepared, more controlled. But those voices were drowned out by the overwhelming tide of empathy. For every critic, there were 10 people who stepped forward to support her, who understood that being human, even for a public figure, meant showing weakness from time to time. As for Melania, she emerged from this experience stronger, more resilient, and more aware of her own power. She had allowed herself to be vulnerable, and in doing so, she found her own voice. The world saw her not as the First Lady, but as a woman who had lived through extraordinary challenges, who had kept her personal struggles private for so long, but who, in a single moment, allowed herself to be seen for who she truly was. The incident had done something extraordinary. It reminded the world that no matter how high a person climbs, how perfect their public image may seem, they are still human. And humans, no matter how strong they appear, are allowed to break. The fallout from this moment would have lasting effects. It shifted the narrative surrounding Melania Trump. Instead of being the cold, distant figure that many had portrayed her as, she became a symbol of resilience and vulnerability. People who had once criticized her now empathized with her. And in the end, it wasn't just about the tears. It was about the courage to show up, to stand tall in the face of